Age of Titans. Primordial origins. Chaos, Gaia, and Uranus. In the beginning, according to the ancient Greek poet Hesiod, there was only chaos, the yawning void. From this primordial emptiness emerged Gaia, Gaia, the earth, who became the firm foundation of the world. Gaia, in turn, brought forth starry Uranus, Uranus, the sky, to cover her on all sides as an equal and to shelter the coming generations of gods. As Hesiod writes, Gaia first bore starry heaven, Uranus, equal to herself, to cover her on every side and to be an ever-sure abiding place for the blessed gods. Uranus embraced Gaia, and together the sky and earth would be the progenitors of a mighty cosmic family. Gaia and Uranus produced many offspring, including the earliest gods. Among their children were the mighty 12 Titans, who would become the first ruling generation of deities. They also bore the one-eyed Cyclopses and the 100-armed Hecaton Shiras, monstrous beings whom Uranus despised and hid away deep in the earth. The constant imprisonment of these children within Gaia caused her great pain. Gaia plotted with her Titan offspring to take revenge on Uranus for his cruelty. In a dramatic act of rebellion, the youngest Titan, Cronus, ambushed his father. Armed with a sickle of unbreakable adamantine driven by Gaia, Cronus castrated Uranus, ending his tyrannical reign over the cosmos. With this violent act, the sky god's blood fell upon the earth, giving rise to the vengeful Erinyes, fierce giants, and the ash tree nymphs called Moirai, while the severed flesh of Uranus, cast into the sea, foamed and birthed the goddess Aphrodite from the waves. Uranus, defeated and anguished, cursed his Titan children and ominously named them Titans, meaning strainers or stretchers, for the excessive audacity of their deed, warning that vengeance would come upon them in time. Thus, in an act of cosmic succession, Cronus and his Titan siblings overthrew Uranus and commenced a new age of the world. The 12 original Titans. From the union of sky and earth came 12 magnificent Titans, 6 brothers and 6 sisters, who personified fundamental aspects of the cosmos. According to Hesiod's Theogony, these 12 were Oceanus, Coeus, Crius, Hyperion, Iapetus, and Cronus, the males, and Theia, Rhea, Themis, Mnemosyne, Phoebe, and Tethys, the females. These great Titans were the elder gods, a generation before the Olympians, and each had unique domains and roles in myth. Oceanus and Tethys, Titans of the primordial waters. Oceanus was the Titan god of the great earth-encircling river, Oceanus, which the ancient Greeks imagined as a vast freshwater stream flowing around the entire world. In cosmology, Oceanus represented the outer boundary of the flat disk of the Earth, the source of all the Earth's fresh waters, from rivers and springs to rain clouds. He is often depicted in art as a bearded god with bull's horns and the tail of a serpentine fish, symbolizing the mixing of land and sea. Oceanus regulated the heavenly bodies that rose from and set into his waters, essentially controlling the cycles of day and night, as the sun, moon, and stars dipped into his currents at the horizon. Tethys, sister and wife of Oceanus, was the Titaness of the primal waters that nourished the earth. She was revered as a mother of fertile fountains and nursing springs, her name deriving from a word meaning nurse or grandmother. Together, Oceanus and Tethys were an incredibly fertile pair, parents to thousands of river gods and water nymphs. Hesiod tells us they produced 3,000 Patamoi, river gods, and 3,000 Oceanids, water nymphs of springs and streams. Every river known to the Greeks, from the mightiest Nile to the local brook, was thus a child of Oceanus and Tethys, embodied as a deity. Importantly, Oceanus was unique among his brothers. He did not participate in the attack on Uranus, nor did he later join the war against Zeus. He remained neutral, a wise and aloof figure, content with governing the waters that girdled the world. Tethys also fostered the next generation of gods. In one myth, the goddess Hera was brought to Oceanus and Tethys for safekeeping during the Great War between Titans and Olympians. Hyperion and Theia, Titans of heavenly light. Hyperion was the Titan of heavenly light and observance, often regarded as the bright, watchful eye of the sky. His name means the High One, or Watcher from above, reflecting his role in overseeing the cycles of day and night. By his union with his sister Titaness, Theia, Hyperion became the father of the great lights of the sky, Helios, the moon, and Eos. The historian Diodorus Siculus writes that Hyperion was the first to understand, by diligent attention and observation, the movement of both the sun and the moon and the other stars, and the seasons as well, and to make these facts known to others. In the great cosmic drama, Hyperion also took part in Uranus's overthrow. Later writers describe him as one of 4 Titan brothers posted at the 4 corners of the world to hold down sky while Cronus wielded the sickle. Hyperion himself was associated with the eastern pillar of the cosmos, being the father of the east's dawn and morning sun. Theia, sometimes called Euryphaesa, wide shining, was the Titaness of radiance, sight, and precious light. She personified the pure luminosity of the ether and the value of all that gleams. Her name, Theia, is related to the Greek word for view or sight, Theia, indicating her role in making things visible. Some traditions also associate Theia with glittering treasures of the earth. Later folklore described her as the source of the sparkle in gold, silver, and gems. The second generation, Helios, Selene, and Eos. The children of Hyperion and Theia became some of the most beloved and recognizable deities in Greek mythology, though technically of the second Titan generation. Helios, the sun god, drove his blazing chariot across the sky each day, pulled by 4 fire-breathing horses, Pyroeis, Eos, Aethon, and Phlegon. From his position high above, Helios saw all that transpired on Earth and was often called upon as a witness to oaths. His most famous myth involves his mortal son Phaethon, who begged to drive the sun chariot for a day. Despite Helios's warnings, Phaethon took the reins and lost control. The chariot careened too close to Earth, scorching Libya into desert and burning the skin of the Ethiopians. To prevent the world's destruction, Zeus struck Phaethon down with a thunderbolt. Helios grieved deeply and for a day refused to drive his chariot, plunging the world into darkness until the other gods consoled him. This myth served as a cautionary tale about hubris and the dangers of exceeding one's natural limits. Selene, the moon goddess, drove her silver chariot through the night sky, her pale beauty illuminating the darkness. Her most famous tale is her love for the beautiful shepherd Endymion. Selene fell so deeply in love with the mortal youth that she asked Zeus to grant him eternal life. Zeus obliged, but Endymion was placed in an eternal sleep in a cave on Mount Latmus. Each night, Selene would descend from the heavens to lie beside her sleeping lover, and by him she bore 50 daughters, representing the 50 lunar months of the Olympiad cycle. This bittersweet romance, eternal love with one who never ages but also never wakes, became a favorite subject of later poets and painters. Eos, the rosy-fingered dawn, heralded each new day by opening the gates of heaven for Helios's chariot. Homer consistently describes her as rosy-fingered or saffron-robed, painting the sky with her colors each morning. Eos had an insatiable passion for handsome mortals, a curse laid upon her by Aphrodite for dallying with Ares. She abducted several beautiful youths, including Tithonus, whom she loved deeply and begged Zeus to make immortal. Zeus granted her wish, but Eos forgot to ask for eternal youth as well. As centuries passed, Tithonus aged endlessly, shriveling and withering but unable to die, until Eos took pity and transformed him into a cicada. Her son by Tithonus was Memnon, king of Ethiopia, who fought at Troy and was slain by Achilles. Eos's tears of grief for her son became the morning dew. Coeus and Phoebe, titans of intellect and prophecy. Coeus, was the titan of intellect and the inquisitive mind, sometimes associated with the axis of the heavens. In the grand architecture of the cosmos, Coeus came to signify the celestial pole, the pivot around the stars revolve. In later interpretations, Coeus's alternate name was Polus, meaning pole, as in the North Pole of the sky. This identification made Coeus a personification of the northern pillar of the world, one of the four Titan brothers who held sky and earth apart after Uranus's fall. As the Titan of the North and the Axis, Coeus was believed to oversee the turning of the constellations and perhaps to govern the rational order of the universe. Phoebe was the Titaness of bright intellect and prophetic wisdom. Her very name means bright or radiant, but it is also linked to words for prophecy and purification. In myth, Phoebe became esteemed as the goddess who presided over the famous Oracle of Delphi in its earliest days. Aeschylus, in his play Eumenides, tells that Phoebe received custody of Delphi from her mother Gaia and later passed it on to her grandson Apollo, becoming the third prophetess of Delphi. Together, Coeus and Phoebe had two daughters of great significance, Leto and Asteria. Leto would become the mother of Apollo and Artemis by Zeus, linking Phoebe's line directly to the Olympian pantheon. In fact, Apollo himself was sometimes called Phobos as an epithet, reflecting the inherited brightness of his grandmother and the prophetic gift she gave him. Their other daughter, Asteria, whose name means starry one, was associated with the night oracles and became the mother of Hecate, goddess of magic and crossroads. Through these descendants, Coeus and Phoebe's legacy pervades the realms of prophecy. Apollo at Delphi and Hecate in the night both carry forward the titanic gift of foresight and divine knowledge. Crius, the forgotten titan of the south. Crius, whose name means ram, is among the most mysterious of the titans, rarely featured in surviving myths, yet essential to the cosmic architecture. Crius was associated with the southern pillar of heaven and, in some interpretations, with the constellations that measured the year's progression. As the southern counterpart to Coeus in the north, Crius represented the celestial sphere's stability in the southern sky. Crius married Eurybia, a daughter of Pontus, the sea, and Gaia, making him one of the few titans to wed outside the sibling circle. This union produced three sons who would play significant roles in myth: Astraeus, god of stars and planets, father of the winds and stars by Eos; Pallas, titan of warcraft and the springtime campaign season; and Perseus, titan of destruction, father of Hecate by Asteria. Through Astraeus, Crius's lineage connected to the regulation of the seasons and the winds. Astraeus, starry one, with Eos, produced the four Moirai: Boreas, north wind; Natos, south wind; Eurus, and Zephyrus, west wind, as well as the stars themselves. This made Crius, through his son, the grandfather of the mechanisms that drove weather patterns and seasonal change, essential forces in agricultural Greek society. The association of Crius with the ram may connect to the constellation Aries, which marked the spring equinox in ancient times. As the southern pillar titan, Crius would have been particularly associated with the constellations visible in the southern sky, including those that heralded planting and harvest seasons. Some scholars suggest Crius embodied the concept of celestial measurement and the division of the year, complementing Coeus's role with the eternal pole and Hyperion's with the daily solar cycle. Despite his cosmic importance, Crius appears rarely in narrative myth. He participated in the overthrow of Uranus as one of the four Pillar brothers, and later joined Cronus in the Titanomachy, for which he was imprisoned in Tartarus. His relative obscurity in later texts may reflect the absorption of his astral functions by younger gods, like Apollo, prophecy through stars, and Zeus, control of seasons and weather. Iapetus, father of mankind's condition. Iapetus, whose name may derive from a Semitic word meaning to pierce, or relate to Japheth, son of Noah in Semitic tradition, suggesting early cultural exchange, was the titan of mortality, craftsmanship, and the western reaches of the cosmos. As the western pillar titan, Iapetus represented the place where the sun sets, the gateway to the realm of death and the unknown. Iapetus married the Oceanid Clymene, or, in some accounts, Asia, and together they produced 4 sons who would profoundly shape the human condition: Prometheus, forethought; Epimetheus, afterthought; Atlas, endurer; and Menoetis, doomed might. Through these sons, Iapetus's legacy became intimately tied to humanity's struggles, limitations, and virtues. The symbolism of Iapetus as a Western Titan is profound. In Greek thought, the West was associated with death, twilight, and the mysterious lands beyond the known world. Iapetus's placement at this cosmic threshold made him, in essence, the Titan of boundaries and limits, fitting for the father of Prometheus, who tested the boundaries between mortal and divine, and Atlas, who literally holds the boundary between earth and sky. Some traditions link Iapetus to the concept of the human lifespan. As the western pillar where the sun sets daily, Iapetus embodied the inevitable decline that comes with time, the setting of life's sun. His son Menoetis, doomed might, personified the violent, prideful aspects of mortality that lead to downfall, while Atlas represented stoic endurance in the face of eternal burden. Prometheus and Epimetheus, meanwhile, embodied the intellectual gifts and follies that define human existence: foresight and hindsight, wisdom and foolishness. In some genealogies, Iapetus is credited with fathering not just these 4, but also the Oceanid Hesperides through Asia, further cementing his association with the western bounds of the world. The garden of the Hesperides, where golden apples grew, was said to lie at Earth's westernmost edge, perhaps in the Atlas Mountains, a poetic connection to both Iapetus's domain and his son Atlas's fate. Iapetus joined his brothers in the Titanomachy and was subsequently imprisoned in Tartarus. Homer's Iliad mentions him alongside Cronus as sitting in deep Tartarus, far from the light of Helios, a final, ironic punishment for the Titan of the western sunset, condemned to a place where no sun ever reaches. Themis, Titaness of divine law and order. Themis, whose name literally means that which is put in place, or divine law, was the Titaness of divine order, fairness, law, natural law, and custom. Unlike many Titans who represented elemental forces, Themis embodied an abstract yet fundamental principle: the proper ordering of society and cosmos according to eternal laws. In the earliest traditions, Themis held a position of supreme importance at Delphi. She was either the second or third keeper of the oracle, inheriting it from her mother Gaia and later passing it to Phoebe or directly to Apollo in some versions. This succession of earth wisdom to prophetic law to civilized enlightenment mirrors the progression of Greek religious thought itself. Themis's association with Delphi wasn't merely prophetic. She represented the divine law that made prophecy necessary, the understanding that the cosmos operates according to rules that can be known. During the reign of the Olympians, Themis became Zeus's second wife after Metis and his most trusted counselor. Unlike many of Zeus's consorts, Themis's relationship with the king of gods was portrayed as a meeting of equals, a partnership of power and principle. She sat beside Zeus's throne, advising him on matters of justice and cosmic order. This close relationship meant Themis essentially bridged the Titan and Olympian eras, bringing forward the ancient wisdom of divine law into the new regime. By Zeus, Themis bore 2 important sets of daughters: the Horae, seasons, hours; Eunomia, good order; Dike, justice; and Irene, peace, personifications of the proper functioning of civilized society. The Moirai, fates; Clotho, spinner; Lachesis, allottor; and Atropos, inevitable, the 3 who controlled the thread of life for all mortals and even constrained the actions of the gods. Through these daughters, Themis's influence on both natural order, the seasons, and social order, justice and peace, became permanent fixtures of the cosmos. The Moirai, in particular, represented a law higher even than Zeus, the inevitability of fate itself, which not even the king of gods could overrule. Themis appears frequently in Greek mythology as a voice of wisdom and moderation. She warned Zeus about the prophecy concerning Tethys, that the sea nymph would bear a son greater than his father, leading Zeus to marry Tethys off to the mortal Peleus instead. Their son would be Achilles. She presided over the assemblies of the gods, calling them to order and ensuring proper protocol. In human affairs, Themis was invoked at trials and oaths. Her name became synonymous with justice itself. In art, Themis is often depicted holding scales to weigh justice and a sword to enforce it, imagery that would later transfer to her daughter Dike and eventually to the Roman Justitia. However, unlike the blindfolded modern justice, Themis kept her eyes open. She represented not blind justice, but clear-sighted discernment based on divine law. Themis did not participate in the Titanomachy and thus was never imprisoned. Her integration into the Olympian order was so complete that she essentially transcended the Titan-Olympian divide, proving that some principles, law, order, justice, remain constant regardless of which generation of God rules. Mnemosyne, Titaness of memory and mother of the Muses. Mnemosyne, whose name means memory, was the Titaness of remembrance, the preservation of knowledge, and the oral traditions that kept the past alive. In a pre-literate society like early Greece, memory was not merely a mental faculty, but a sacred force, the means by which laws, genealogies, histories, and poems survived from generation to generation. Mnemosyne's importance cannot be overstated in the context of archaic Greece. She represented the library of the mind, the capacity to recall and recite epic poems, legal precedents, religious rituals, and genealogical records. Poets invoked Mnemosyne alongside or sometimes instead of the Muses, recognizing that all artistic creation depends first on memory, the memory of stories heard, traditions learned, and forms mastered. According to Hesiod, Zeus came to Mnemosyne in Pieria and laid with her for 9 consecutive nights. From this union, Mnemosyne bore the 9 Muses, each governing a different art or science. Callipio, epic poetry. Clio, history. Erato, love poetry. Euterpe, music, flute. Melpomene, tragedy. Polyhymnia, hymns. Terpsichore, dance. Thalia, comedy. Urania, astronomy. The symbolism of memory birthing the arts is profound. All creative endeavors depend on remembering, whether remembering traditional forms, past stories to retell, or the techniques of one's craft. The 9 nights of conception may represent the 9 months of pregnancy, or symbolically, the long gestation period required for mastery of any art. The Muses were said to dwell on Mount Helicon in Boeotia and Mount Parnassus near Delphi, where sacred springs flowed. The Hippocrene spring on Helicon, created by the hoof strike of Pegasus, was especially associated with poetic inspiration. Poets would drink from these springs and invoke the Muses, thereby invoking Mnemosyne's power before beginning their recitations. Hesiod himself, at the beginning of the Theogony, describes how the Muses came to him while he shepherded on Mount Helicon and gave him the gift of song. He invokes them, "Tell me these things, Olympian Muses, daughters of Zeus who holds the Aegis," and begin with the Heliconian Muses. But he also acknowledges their mother. These goddesses of inspiration are fundamentally daughters of memory. In philosophical traditions, particularly Pythagoreanism and Platonism, Mnemosyne took on deeper significance. Plato's theory of amnemnesis, recollection, held that all learning is really remembering, that souls knew all truths before birth, and learning is the process of remembering what we once knew. In this view, Mnemosyne became almost a cosmic principle, the force that allows souls to reconnect with eternal truths. In the Orphic mysteries, initiates were instructed about the geography of the afterlife, including 2 springs, Lethe, forgetfulness, and Mnemosyne, memory. The dead were warned to avoid drinking from Lethe and instead seek Mnemosyne spring, so they would remember their divine nature and past lives, achieving a form of immortality through continuous consciousness. Like Themis, Mnemosyne did not participate in the Titanomachy and was honored in the Olympian age. Through her daughters, the Muses, she ensured that the stories of both Titans and Olympians would be preserved, sung, and remembered, including the very stories of the Titanomachy itself. In a beautiful irony, it is thanks to Mnemosyne's legacy that we remember the Titans at all. Cronus and Rhea, the ruling Titans and the prophecy. Cronus, Kronos, was the youngest of the Titans and their bold leader, destined to become the king of the Titans. In the violent overthrow of Uranus, it was Cronus alone who dared to wield the sickle and commit the act that freed the world from Uranus's oppression. After Uranus's fall, Cronus took the throne of the universe, ushering in a new era of Titan rule from Mount Othrys, alongside his queen and sister Rhea. Cronus's name in Greek, Kronos, is often connected to Chronos, meaning time, and indeed he was later identified with the personification of time in philosophical traditions. In Greek cult practice, Cronus had aspects of a harvest god. Many regions named the harvest month after him, and the Athenians celebrated a festival called the Chronia during the reaping season. Under Cronus's rule, it was said that men lived in a golden age, simply and virtuously, with the earth yielding plentifully of its own accord. Hesiod describes that men of the golden age lived like gods, without sorrow of heart, free from toil and grief. The fruitful earth, unforced, bare them fruit in abundance. By Cronus's side was his beloved sister Rhea, often called Mother of the Gods. Rhea represented fertility, motherhood, and the generative flow of life. Her name was linked to the Greek word rheo, flow, signifying the flow of mother's milk, birth waters, and menstrual blood, all life-giving substances. Rhea bore Cronus 6 children who would become the first generation of Olympian gods: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, and finally Zeus. However, a dark prophecy loomed. Cronus would be overthrown by one of his own children, just as he had overthrown Uranus. Fearful of this fate, Cronus fell into a heinous pattern. As soon as Rhea presented him with a newborn, he would swallow the infant whole, imprisoning the child alive in his immortal stomach. One after another, 5 children were devoured. When pregnant with her 6th child, Rhea secretly gave birth to Zeus in a hidden cavern on the Isle of Crete, Mount Dicte or Mount Ida. She entrusted him to the goat nymph Amalthea and the armed Coretes, who clashed their spears against shields to drown out the baby's cries. Meanwhile, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and presented this bundle to Cronus, who swallowed it whole, thinking he had eliminated the threat. Zeus was raised in secret until he reached maturity. When the time came, with the help of Metis and Oceanid, Zeus administered a potion to Cronus, causing him to regurgitate his swallowed children. Out came Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, miraculously intact, followed by the stone, which Zeus later set at Delphi as the Omphalos, navel of the world. The prophecy that Cronus feared was now in motion, and the stage was set for war. The Titanomachy, war between Titans and Olympians. With Zeus's siblings liberated, the Olympian gods declared rebellion against Cronus and the Titan order. Zeus led his brothers and sisters to challenge the Titans for rulership of the cosmos. The Titans marshaled from Mount Othrys under Cronus's command. Nearly all the male Titans joined the fight, including Atlas and Menoetius, sons of Iapetus. The female Titans and wise elders like Oceanus sat out or covertly aided Zeus. For 10 years, the war raged with neither side gaining advantage. Earth, Gaia, ultimately gave Zeus crucial counsel. He would only prevail if he freed those whom Cronus had imprisoned. Zeus descended into Tartarus and freed the Cyclopes and Hecatonchires. The Cyclopes crafted Zeus's thunderbolt, Poseidon's trident, and Hades' helm of darkness. The three hecatonchires, Cottus, Briareus, and Gygus, each with 100 mighty arms, became living engines of war. On the plains of Thessaly, the final battles shook heaven and earth. Zeus unleashed lightning and storms, while the hecatonchires bombarded the Titans with boulders, 50 massive rocks in each of their 100 hands. Under this onslaught, the Titan forces broke. The Titanomachy ended in Olympian victory after a decade of war. Defeat and aftermath, the imprisonment in Tartarus. Zeus meted out stern punishment to the vanquished Titans. The defeated, Cronus, Iapetus, Coeus, Crius, Hyperion, and their warrior sons, were bound in heavy chains and cast down into Tartarus, the deepest abyss of the underworld. Tartarus was described as far beneath the earth as the sky is above it, a place of unending darkness. The hecatonchires stood watch at the gates, guarded by iron gates and a bronze threshold. However, not every Titan met this fate. The female Titans, having not participated in combat or having aided the Olympians, were shown clemency. Themis became Zeus's counselor and bore him the fates and seasons. Mnemosyne joined Zeus and bore the 9 muses. Rhea remained venerated as the Great Mother. Tethys and Oceanus continued their rule over the waters. Among male Titans, Oceanus's neutrality spared him, and Helios, second generation, continued driving the sun chariot. Some later poets, notably Pindar, suggested Zeus ultimately freed the Titans, and that Cronus was made king of the Isles of the Blessed, a paradise for heroic souls. This reconciliation appears in Orphic and certain local traditions, indicating enduring respect for the elder gods. However, the dominant narrative holds that the defeated Titans remained in Tartarus, clearing the stage for Olympian rule. Beyond the war, the fate of individual Titans. Prometheus, the Titan who loved mankind. Prometheus, son of Iapetus, is perhaps the most celebrated Titan in later mythology. His name means forethought, and he possessed prophetic wisdom. During the Titanomachy, Prometheus either remained neutral or aided Zeus, thus sparing himself imprisonment. Prometheus's sympathy lay with mortals. When Zeus withheld fire from humans, Prometheus boldly stole it from Olympus, smuggling it to Earth in a hollow fennel stalk. This gift enabled civilization, but affronted Zeus's will. In wrath, Zeus sent Pandora with her jar of evils to humanity and exacted personal punishment on Prometheus. The kindly Titan was chained to Mount Caucasus, where each day a great eagle descended and devoured his liver. Being immortal, Prometheus could not die. Each night, his liver regenerated, only to be torn out again the next day. He endured this torment for ages, refusing to submit or apologize. Eventually, the hero Heracles slew the eagle and freed Prometheus with Zeus's permission after Prometheus revealed the secret prophecy about Tethys that Zeus needed to know. Prometheus became a symbol of resistance, enlightenment, and the price of helping humanity progress against divine will. Atlas, the weight of heaven. Atlas, another son of Iapetus, fought with exceptional might against Zeus. For his leadership in the rebellion, Zeus sentenced Atlas to hold up the sky for all eternity. He was stationed at the extreme western edge of the world, later identified with the Atlas Mountains in North Africa. Homer describes Atlas standing at the ends of the earth, holding the broad sky aloft, under pressure of his head and tireless arms. In one encounter, Perseus turned Atlas to stone using Medusa's head, explaining the origin of the Atlas Mountains according to Ovid. But in most traditions, Atlas remains forever straining under the celestial burden, a powerful image of endurance. The famous Farnese Atlas statue depicts him kneeling with the celestial globe on his back. Atlas's punishment was fitting. As an expert astronomer, in some myths, the cosmic vault and all its stars now literally rested on his shoulders. He became a living pillar, taking on the burden that once required 4 cosmic titans together. Other fates. Menoetius, brother of Prometheus and Atlas, was struck down by Zeus's thunderbolt and imprisoned in Tartarus for his arrogance during the war. His name means ruined strength. Epimetheus, the fourth son of Iapetus, name meaning afterthought, survived the war but made his mark through folly. Despite Prometheus's warnings, he accepted Zeus's gift of Pandora as his wife. Epimetheus's lack of foresight led to Pandora opening her jar of evils, releasing hardship upon mortals. Nevertheless, he fathered Pyrrha, who, with her husband Deucalion, survived the Great Flood. Leto, daughter of Coeus and Phoebe, became mother of Zeus's children, Apollo and Artemis, securing a revered place on Olympus as matron of two major gods. Hecate, granddaughter of the Titans, daughter of Asteria and Persis, was esteemed by Zeus above all, receiving honors in sky, earth, and sea. This Titan descendant was integrated and venerated as goddess of magic and crossroads. The Rhea Cybele cult, the Great Mother, endures. While many Titans faded after the Titanomachy, Rhea's worship not only continued but intensified, particularly through her identification with the Phrygian goddess Cybele. This syncretism created one of the most powerful and enduring religious cults of the ancient Mediterranean world. The Rhea Cybele cult, also called the Magna Mater or Great Mother cult, was characterized by ecstatic worship, featuring drums, cymbals, wild dancing, and frenzied devotion. Priests called Galli served the goddess, and her processions featured lion-drawn chariots, reflecting her mastery over wild nature. The myth underlying the cult merged Greek and Phrygian elements. Rhea Cybele was the mountain mother, dwelling in caves and wild places, who had saved Zeus and nurtured all life. Her worship spread from Anatolia throughout the Greek world and eventually to Rome, where she was officially adopted during the Second Punic War, 204 BCE, after the Sibylline books prophesied that Rome needed the Great Mother to defeat Hannibal. In Rome, the Megalacia festival was celebrated each April with games, theatrical performances, and processions. The black meteorite stone representing Cybele was housed in a temple on the Palatine Hill. Roman citizens were forbidden from becoming Galli, the self-castrated priests, but the cult attracted widespread devotion, particularly among women and the lower classes, who saw in the Great Mother a powerful protector and source of fertility. The durability of Rhea's cult demonstrates how certain Titan worship adapted and survived the mythological transition to Olympian dominance. Unlike her imprisoned brothers, Rhea's motherhood and life-giving power made her indispensable, and her worship continued for over a millennium after the classical myths were codified. Regional variations and local cults. Greek religion was never monolithic, and different city-states maintained distinct traditions about the Titans that sometimes contradicted the standard Hesiodic version. Cretan traditions. Crete maintained special pride in being Zeus's birthplace and preserved unique Titan-related myths. The Curetes, who protected infant Zeus, were sometimes said to be sons of Rhea or Titans themselves. Cretan Zeus worship had unusual features. Some Cretan traditions claimed Zeus died and was buried on Crete, shocking to other Greeks, and they showed a tomb of Zeus on Mount Juktas. This may reflect pre-Greek religious layers where a dying and rising god predated the immortal Olympian Zeus. Arcadian traditions. Arcadia, claiming to be the most ancient Greek region, had its own cosmogony. Some Arcadian texts made Rhea the primary creator, with Zeus as her subordinate. They emphasized chthonic, earthly aspects of Rhea and sometimes identified her completely with Gaia, suggesting an older matriarchal religious structure. Delphi's prophetic succession. The Oracle of Delphi preserved a tradition of succession from Gaia to Themis to Phoebe to Apollo, or variations thereof. This theological genealogy legitimized Apollo's possession of Greece's most important oracle by showing it passed through proper matrilineal succession from the earth itself. Each priestess embodied this lineage, being called the Pythia, after Python, the serpent son of Gaia whom Apollo slew to take the oracle. Titan worship in Asia Minor. Greek colonies in Asia Minor, modern Turkey, maintained stronger Titan worship, particularly of Oceanus and Tethys as water source deities. Coastal cities often depicted Oceanus on coins and in temple friezes, acknowledging the sea's economic importance. The Ionians especially revered Hyperion and Helios, with Rhodes becoming the primary center of Helios worship. The Colossus of Rhodes was a massive statue of Helios, one of the seven wonders. Eleusinian mysteries. The secret rites at Eleusis, centered on Demeter and Persephone, incorporated Rhea prominently. In these mysteries, Rhea appeared as the ancient initiator who first taught Demeter the sacred rites. Initiates learned secret doctrines about the soul's journey, and Titan-era wisdom was presented as the foundation of these salvific mysteries. Orphic cosmogonies, alternative Titan theologies. The Orphic religious movement, attributed to the mythical poet Orpheus, developed alternative cosmogonies that elevated the Titans' importance and reinterpreted their myths in mystical terms. The Orphic creation myth. In Orphic theology, creation began with Cronus, time, who generated aether and chaos. From these emerged a cosmic egg, from which hatched Phanes, also called Protogonus or Eros, the firstborn god of light and procreation. Phanes was a hermaphroditic deity with golden wings, who created the first generation of gods. This version placed the Titans in a different cosmic position, not as the first generation, but as secondary creators. The Dionysian mystery. The most significant Orphic myth involving Titans reinterpreted humanity's origin. According to this tradition, the Titans, at Hera's instigation, tore apart the infant god Dionysus and devoured him. Zeus, enraged, struck the Titans down with lightning, reducing them to ash. From these ashes, containing both titanic matter and Dionysian divinity, since they'd consumed him, humanity was created. This myth carried profound theological implications. Humans possess a dual nature, the earthly, evil titanic component, and the divine, good Dionysian soul. Orphic rituals aimed to purify the titanic element and liberate the divine spark. This made the Titans embodiments of base materiality and original sin, a very different characterization from Hesiod's elder gods. Orphic hymns to individual Titans. The Orphic hymn collection includes invocations to several Titans, treating them as powerful deities worthy of worship. To Cronus, eternal father, crafty one, immortal time. To Rhea, mother of gods and men, fountain of blessed mortals. To Themis, first formed, initial voice, originating justice. These hymns suggest ongoing Orphic veneration of Titans as cosmological principles rather than defeated enemies. In Orphic eschatology, initiates learned to navigate the underworld using passwords referencing Titans, knowledge that would ensure a blessed afterlife. Philosophical interpretations. Later Neoplatonist philosophers, like Proclus, interpreted Orphic Titan myths allegorically. The Titans represented the principle of division and multiplicity, while the Olympians represented unity and intellect. The Titanomachy thus symbolized the cosmic tension between fragmentation and integration, chaos and order, an eternal philosophical dialectic rather than a historical war. Titans in Greek art and iconography. The visual representation of Titans in ancient Greek art evolved significantly over time, reflecting changing theological and cultural attitudes. Archaic period, 700 to 480 BC. Early depictions of Titans are rare but dramatic. Black figure pottery occasionally shows the castration of Uranus, with Cronus wielding his sickle. These scenes are brutal and direct, emphasizing the violence of succession. Titans are depicted as fully anthropomorphic, indistinguishable from Olympians in appearance, a visual reminder that the difference between generations was political, not ontological. Classical period, 480 to 323 BC. The great temple friezes and sculptures of this era sometimes featured Titanomachy scenes, but they're vastly outnumbered by Giantomachy, war with giants. The Parthenon, for instance, shows no Titanomachy, but includes Giantomachy metopopes. This suggests the Titan War was considered more ancient and abstract, while the Giant War was more immediate and politically relevant, often interpreted as representing Greek victory over Persia. However, individual titans appear frequently. Helios, with his radiant crown, emerges from the eastern pediment of the Parthenon. Selene's horse descends in the western pediment. Themis appears on vases receiving offerings. Prometheus's punishment was a popular subject, appearing on dozens of vase paintings showing the eagle attacking his liver while Heracles approaches with bow drawn. Hellenistic period, 323 to 31 BC. This era produced the most dramatic Titan representations. The Pergamon altar, c. 180 to 160 BC, one of antiquity's greatest sculptures, includes some figures identified as Titans in its massive Giantomachy frieze. The distinction between Titans and Giants had blurred somewhat by this period, with both representing chaotic forces defeated by Olympian order. The Farnese Atlas, Roman copy of a Hellenistic original, provides our most iconic Titan image. Atlas kneeling, muscles straining, holding a celestial sphere covered with constellations. His face shows exhaustion and resignation, making him a sympathetic figure despite his rebellion. This sculpture transformed Atlas from villain to tragic hero, emphasizing endurance over defiance. Symbolic elements. When Titans were depicted, certain iconographic elements were standard. Cronus, Saturn, sickle or scythe, often older and bearded. Oceanus, bull horns, crab claw beard, serpentine fishtail. Hyperion, Helios, radiant crown, chariot drawn by 4 horses. Themis, scales and sword, later inherited by Deke or Justitia. Atlas, celestial sphere, shown kneeling or standing. Prometheus, bound to rock or column, eagle attacking. Coin iconography. Greek city-states stamped coins with Titan imagery relevant to local cults. Rhodes featured Helios's radiant head. Sicilian cities showed Oceanus. These numismatic choices advertised civic identity and religious devotion, suggesting Titan worship remained economically and politically significant. Philosophical and allegorical interpretations. Greek philosophers, beginning with the pre-Socratics and continuing through the Neoplatonists, interpreted Titan myths as encoding profound cosmological and metaphysical truths. Pre-Socratic natural philosophy. Early philosophers rationalized Titan myths as primitive attempts to explain natural phenomena. Thales and the Milesians saw Oceanus as representing the primordial water from which all things arise. Heraclitus interpreted the succession myth as representing eternal flux and the warfare of opposites. Empedocles compared the Titans and Olympians to his 4 elements in different mixtures. Plato's use of Titan myths. Plato rarely mentions Titans directly, but engages with their mythic themes. In Timaeus, he presents a creation account where the demiurge, craftsman god, shapes the cosmos, sometimes interpreted as a rationalized Prometheus figure. In Republic, discussing the soul's tripartite nature, some scholars see echoes of the Orphic Titan Dionysus duality. His theory of forms implicitly addresses the Titan question. Are they imperfect copies of divine reality, Olympians, or different forms entirely? Stoic interpretations. Stoic philosophers developed sophisticated allegorical readings. Cleanthes and Chrysippus interpreted Cronus eating his children as time consuming all things it produces. The castration of Uranus represented the separation of heaven and earth necessary for creation to occur in the space between. The Titanomachy symbolized the ordering of chaos into cosmos through logos, divine reason. Individual titans personified natural forces. Oceanus equals water, Hyperion equals fire, etc. Cicero's rationalism. The Roman philosopher Cicero, in De Natura Deorum, offers naturalistic explanations. Saturn, Cronus, derives from satus, sowing, making him an agricultural deity, whose eating children means seeds returning to Earth. The Titans represent the annual cycle of growth and decay. Their imprisonment in Tartarus equals seeds buried in Earth during winter. Plutarch's moral philosophy. Plutarch treated myths as moral allegories. Cronus's paranoia and child-devouring illustrate tyranny's self-destructive nature. Prometheus's suffering shows the cost of altruism and enlightenment. Atlas's burden represents the weight of cosmic knowledge. The Titano-Olympian succession demonstrates that force alone cannot maintain power. Justice, represented by Zeus's more moral rule, ultimately prevails. Neoplatonic metaphysics. Late ancient Neoplatonists like Plotinus, Porphyry, and Proclus developed intricate metaphysical readings. The Titans represented the level of soul, psyche, in the cosmic hierarchy, intermediate between divine intellect, nous, and material nature. The Titanomachy symbolized the soul's descent into matter and need for purification. Different Titans embodied different aspects of the world soul. Proclus's commentary on Plato's Timaeus contains extensive Titan theology, arguing that they represent divisive or particularizing powers that create multiplicity from unity, a necessary cosmic function, not a moral failure. Legacy in Roman religion and Saturnalia. When Rome encountered Greek culture, they identified their own gods with Greek counterparts, and several Titans found new life in Roman religion, most notably Saturn, Cronus. Saturn's transformation. In Rome, Saturn underwent a remarkable rehabilitation from child-devouring tyrant to benevolent father figure. Roman tradition held that after Jupiter, Zeus, overthrew him, Saturn fled to Latium, where King Janus welcomed him. Saturn then established a kingdom characterized by perfect justice, equality, and abundance, a true golden age. Virgil's Aeneid and Ovid's Metamorphoses celebrate this peaceful Saturnian reign as Italy's founding era. Saturn's temple in Rome, located at the foot of the Capitoline Hill, was one of the city's oldest and most important. Significantly, it housed the Roman treasury, Aerarium, linking the god to wealth and prosperity. The temple's foundation dated traditionally to 497 BCE, though possibly reflecting an earlier shrine. Saturnalia, Rome's greatest festival. The Saturnalia, celebrated from December 17th to 23rd, became Rome's most popular holiday. Its features included role reversal. Masters served slaves at banquet, echoing the Golden Age's equality. Gift-giving, exchange of small presents, sigillaria, candles, and joke gifts. Gambling, normally restricted activity freely allowed during the festival. Feasting, public banquets and private celebrations with elaborate meals. Freedom of speech, social norms relaxed, allowing satirical comments on authority. Saturnalia, the festival greeting still recognized today. The festival explicitly aimed to recreate Saturn's golden age temporarily. The opening ritual involved untying the woolen bonds kept year-round on Saturn's cult statue, symbolically freeing the god to restore his age of freedom. Roman writers like Macrobius described Saturnalia as the best of days, when class distinctions dissolved and joy reigned. Saturnalia's cultural influence was enormous. It affected Christian Christmas traditions, December 25 celebration date, gift-giving, feasting, and persisted into late antiquity, even as Christianity spread. The festival's appeal transcended religious belief. It fulfilled a universal human longing for a temporary escape from social hierarchy into an idealized world of plenty and equality. Ops and Rhea. The Roman goddess Ops, meaning resources or wealth, was identified with Rhea. Like Rhea, Ops was a goddess of fertility and the earth's abundance. Her festival, the Opalia, December 19th, fell during Saturnalia and celebrated the harvest safely stored for winter. The Opiconcivia in August similarly honored the earth's generosity. Ops was also syncretized with Cybele, creating a complex triple goddess, Rhea, Ops, Cybele, representing maternal nurture, agricultural wealth, and wild nature. Other Roman Titan identifications. Caelus equals Uranus, though less culturally important. Terra equals Gaia, fundamental Earth Mother. Sol equals Helios, sun god, especially prominent in late Empire. Luna equals Selene, moon goddess. The Roman period thus preserved and transformed Titan worship, making it more accessible and morally positive. The tyrant Cronus became the benevolent Saturn. The defeated old gods became symbols of a lost paradise Romans yearned to recover. The Titans in medieval and Renaissance thought. After Christianity displaced Greco-Roman paganism, Titan myths survived through literature, art, and allegory, taking on new meanings in medieval and Renaissance contexts. Medieval allegory. Christian scholars couldn't discard classical mythology. It was embedded in the Latin texts foundational to education. Instead, they allegorized it. Cronus, Saturn eating his children, equals time destroying all temporal things. Only the eternal survives. The Titanomachy equals the fallen angel's rebellion against God. Prometheus equals a type of Christ, suffering for humanity's benefit, or, alternatively, a prideful rebel against divine order. Atlas equals the Christian bearing the cross, or philosophers bearing the weight of knowledge. The 12th century Ovid moralized, reinterpreted all of Ovid's myths, including Titan stories, as Christian allegories. Saturn became a figure of melancholy, but also of contemplation and wisdom. Dante's Divine Comedy. Though Dante doesn't feature Titans prominently, classical giants, including Titan-related figures, appear in the ninth circle of hell, imprisoned as rebels against divine order. Renaissance humanism. The Renaissance rediscovered classical culture with new enthusiasm, and Titans gained fresh relevance. Artistic revival. Renaissance painters and sculptors embraced Titan myths as subjects. Giorgio Vasari's The Mutilation of Uranus, c. 1560, dramatizes the primal violence of succession. Peter Paul Rubens's Fall of the Titans, 1637-38, dynamic Baroque depiction of divine warfare. Multiple depictions of Prometheus's punishment by Rubens, Titian, and others. Saturn devouring his son became a popular, if grotesque subject, most famously painted by Goya in the 19th century. Literary Renaissance. Titan myths appeared in Renaissance poetry and drama. Petrarch identified with Prometheus in his exile and suffering. Marlowe's Dr. Faustus echoes Promethean themes of forbidden knowledge. Shakespeare references Titans throughout his plays, using Titan for the sun and invoking Hyperion as an ideal of beauty and majesty. Hamlet compares his father to Hyperion to a satyr. Astrological Renaissance. Renaissance astrology, reviving Ptolemaic traditions, associated Saturn with melancholy, contemplation, agriculture, and old age. Saturnine temperament became a recognized character type, gloomy, thoughtful, prone to philosophical meditation. This influenced art, Durer's Melancholia I, and medicine, theories of humoral balance. Emblem books. 16th–17th century emblem books, which combined images with moral verses, frequently used Titan imagery. Atlas bearing the sphere, the wise man bearing knowledge. Prometheus, bound, the price of enlightenment. Saturn with scythe, time's inevitability and harvest time. Modern cultural legacy. The Titans have remained vital in modern culture, from romantic poetry to contemporary popular media, continually reinterpreted for new contexts. Romantic poetry. Romantic poets embraced Prometheus especially as a symbol of rebellion, creativity, and defiance against tyranny. Goethe's Prometheus, 1774, dramatic poem presenting Prometheus as the archetypal artist rebel. Byron's Prometheus, 1816, celebrates the Titan's defiance. Thy godlike crime was to be kind. Shelley's Prometheus Unbound, 1820, reimagines the myth as an allegory of human liberation from oppression. Keats's Hyperion, 1818–19, unfinished, epic poem on the fall of the Titans to the Olympians, exploring themes of progress and supersession. For the Romantics, Prometheus embodied the revolutionary spirit, the artist suffering for bringing enlightenment, and humanity's potential for self-liberation. The Titans, more broadly, represented primal nature and authentic feeling against Olympian rationality and civilization. 19th century scholarship. Modern philology and comparative mythology transformed understanding of Titans. Friedrich Kreutzer and the Symbolist school saw Titans as remnants of pre-Greek religious systems. Karl Ottfried Müller and others analyzed Titan myths through regional Greek variations. James Fraser's The Golden Bough, 1890, compared Cronus, Saturn to dying and rising gods worldwide. Jane Ellen Harrison's Prolegomena, 1903, argued Titans represented pre-Olympian chthonic religion. Psychoanalysis. Freud and Jung found rich material in Titan myths. Freud saw the succession myth, Uranus, Cronus, Zeus, as encoding the Oedipal complex. Jung interpreted Titans as archetypes of the collective unconscious, representing primordial psychic forces. James Hillman and archetypal psychology explored the Titanic as representing the soul's darker, more powerful depths. 20th-21st literature. Titans continue inspiring literature. C.S. Lewis's The Magician's Nephew features Aslan's creation song echoing Orphic cosmogonies. Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson series revives Titan myths for young audiences, with Cronus as the antagonist attempting to rise from Tartarus. Dan Simmons's Hyperion series, sci-fi novels named after Keats's poem, uses Titan themes to explore AI, consciousness, and cosmic conflict. Film and television. Visual media has embraced Titan mythology. Clash of the Titans, 1981, 2010, though focused on Perseus, includes Titan references and the figure of Zeus. Immortals, 2011, depicts Titans as imprisoned monster giants. Percy Jackson films bring Riordan's literary revival to screen. Wonder Woman, 2017, references Titan Ares as antagonist, though Ares is actually Olympian, shows continuing conflation. Various anime and video games, particularly Japanese media, frequently features Titan-inspired characters and themes. Scientific nomenclature. The Titans achieved a kind of immortality through astronomy. Saturn's moons are named after Titans and associated figures: Titan, Rhea, Hyperion, Iapetus, Phoebe, Themis, Mnemosyne, Prometheus, Atlas. Titan, Saturn's largest moon, discovered in 1655 by Christian Huygens, is the only moon with a substantial atmosphere. The asteroid belt includes asteroids named after Titans. Days of the week. Saturday, Dies Saturni, preserves Saturn or Cronus in English and Romance languages. Linguistic legacy. English retains Titan-derived terms. Titanic, enormous, powerful, of exceptional strength or size. Saturnine, gloomy, melancholic, slow to act. Atlas, book of maps, from images of Atlas holding the celestial spear. Ocean, ultimately from Oceanus. Promethean, boldly creative or innovative, especially with technology. Philosophical and political usage. The Titan-Olympian conflict continues as metaphor. Revolutionary movements invoke Promethean imagery, bringing fire or enlightenment to the masses. Discussions of generational change in technology, art, or politics reference the succession of Titans by Olympians. Clash of Titans describes major power struggles. Debates about AI and technological progress echo Promethean themes of dangerous knowledge. Conclusion: the eternal Titans. The Titans, though defeated in myth, were never truly vanquished. They remain embedded in the foundations of Western culture as symbols of primordial power, lost golden ages, tragic rebellion, and cosmic order. From Hesiod's Theogony to modern science fiction, the Titans evolve with each generation, proving their myths adaptable to new contexts and concerns. They represent several enduring themes. Generational conflict. The succession from Uranus to Cronus to Zeus mirrors universal patterns of children overthrowing parents, new orders replacing old. The Golden Age. Cronus's reign evokes persistent human nostalgia for a lost paradise of equality and abundance. The price of progress. Prometheus embodies the costs and benefits of enlightenment, technology, and defiance. Cosmic order. The victory of Zeus and the Olympians represents the triumph of civilization, law, and justice over primal chaos, though not without cost. Endurance. Atlas, Prometheus bound, and the Titans imprisoned yet undying in Tartarus represent persistence through suffering. The Titans teach that power is temporary, succession inevitable, and memory eternal. Through Mnemosyne's daughters, the Muses, their stories survive. Through Themis, their legacy of law and justice continues. Through Prometheus, their love of humanity endures. Through Rhea Cybele, the Great Mother nurtures still. In Tartarus or freed, transformed into planets or philosophical principles, the Titans remain fundamental to the cosmos, both the mythological universe they inhabited and the imaginative universe they continue to inspire. They are the original gods, the defeated yet immortal, the foundation upon which Olympus stands. Their shadows fall long across time, and in every sunset, Hyperion's domain, every flowing river, Oceanus's children, every human act of creative rebellion, Prometheus's legacy, the Titans remain with us, ancient and eternal. Part 2. Rise of Olympus. The war was over. The terrible, decade-long struggle that had shaken the cosmos to its very foundations, the Titanomachy, had finally ended. The elder gods, Cronus and his belligerent brothers, were defeated, bound in unbreakable chains forged by the Cyclopes, and cast down into the deepest, darkest pit of the underworld, Tartarus. The universe, free from the chaotic tyranny of the Titans, was now a void of power, waiting to be claimed. The victors were the 6 children of Cronus and Rhea, the new generation who had been swallowed and rescued, and who had led the rebellion from Mount Olympus. They were Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, and their leader, Zeus. As recounted in Homer's Iliad, the 3 brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, met to divide the world. They were equals in blood, all sons of Cronus, but the war had proven Zeus to be the first among them in leadership and power. Still, to ensure fairness and prevent the very kind of succession crisis they had just fought, they agreed to divide the realms not by choice, but by chance. They cast lots. 3 destinies were placed in a helmet, and 3 brothers drew their domains. To Zeus fell the wide sky, the bright aether, the realm of clouds and storms. He became the supreme ruler, the king of gods and men, the arbiter of justice from his throne high above the world on Mount Olympus. To Poseidon fell the gray sea, the restless, deep waters that encircle the earth, and all the lands within. He became the master of the oceans, the shaker of the earth, and the lord of horses. To Hades, the eldest brother, fell the third and final lot, the unseen realm, the vast, misty darkness of the underworld, the hidden depths of the earth, and dominion over all departed souls. The earth itself, the domain of their grandmother Gaia, along with the high peak of Mount Olympus, was declared common ground, accessible to all. But in reality, the division was clear. One brother ruled the heavens above, one ruled the waters around, and one ruled the earth beneath. With the cosmos partitioned, the new pantheon established their reign. They were not abstract principles or raw elements like their Titan forebears. They were complex, passionate, and dangerously human-like beings. They were the Olympians, and their stories would become the mythology of the Western world. The 3 brothers, kings of sky, sea, and shadow. Zeus, the king of the gods. Zeus, youngest in birth but first to be freed, was the undisputed sovereign. His name is one of the oldest in the Greek language. The 3 brothers, kings of sky, sea, and shadow. Zeus, the king of the gods. Zeus, youngest in birth but first to be freed, was the undisputed sovereign. His name is one of the oldest in the Greek language, related to the words for sky and day. He was, above all, the god of the bright sky. But his power was far more than meteorological. He was the pater, the father, of gods and mortals. This was not just a biological title, it was a political one. He was the patriarch of the divine family and the divine protector of the human family. His symbols were the thunderbolt, the Cronus, the ultimate weapon of divine judgment, crafted by the Cyclopes, and the eagle, the majestic bird that flew higher than any other, his personal messenger. His sacred tree was the mighty oak. Unlike the capricious and brutal Uranus, or the paranoid Cronus, Zeus was a god of order. His reign was not based on brute force alone, but on law, justice, and the careful management of power. He allied himself with the Titanesses Themis, divine law, and Mnemosyne, memory, taking them as wives before his final marriage to Hera. This was a crucial political move. By marrying Themis, he fathered the Horai, the seasons, and the Moirai, the fates, integrating the concepts of natural order and destiny into his reign. By marrying Mnemosyne, he fathered the 9 muses, ensuring that his new order, his cosmos, would be celebrated, remembered, and solidified through art and history. But Zeus's wisdom was secured by a darker, more primal act. He learned of a prophecy from Gaia that his first wife, the wise Titaness Metis, meaning cunning intelligence, would bear a son destined to overthrow him. Repeating the very paranoia of his father, Cronus, Zeus acted. He did not swallow the child. He tricked Metis into turning herself into a fly and swallowed her whole. In doing so, Zeus absorbed her wisdom, making cunning intelligence a part of his own being. But the child, Athena, was already conceived. Months later, Zeus was struck by a blinding headache. He howled in agony until the craftsman god, Hephaestus, ran to him and split his skull open with an axe. From his head sprang the goddess Athena, fully grown, fully armed, and shouting a war cry. By birthing his rival from his own mind, Zeus had subverted the prophecy. He had not been replaced by his child, he had incorporated her. Yet, for all his role as the god of justice, Zeus was a being of uncontrollable appetites. His reign is a near-endless catalog of infidelities. He pursued goddesses, nymphs, and mortal women with a relentless, shape-shifting hunger, often bringing disaster to those he desired. He came to Leda as a swan, to Europa as a white bull, and to Danae as a shower of gold. These were not mere romances. As the scholar Carl Kerénye noted, these myths represented the sky god descending to earth, mingling the divine with the mortal, and populating the Greek world with the heroes and royal houses who would claim his divine ancestry. His wife, his sister, Hera, became the goddess of marriage precisely because her own marriage was constantly under threat, her primary mythic role being one of jealousy and righteous, terrible vengeance against his lovers and their children. Zeus was a paradox, the dispenser of justice, who was himself lawless, the protector of the household, who was the greatest adulterer, the god of order, who was driven by chaotic desire. He was, in essence, the perfect reflection of the world he ruled, a place of both divine justice and brutal, unpredictable passion. Poseidon, the earth-shaker. Poseidon was the god of the sea, but he was not the primordial ocean itself. That was the domain of the old Titan, Oceanus, who had retired to the edges of the world. Poseidon was the god of the sea's power and its violence. He was the earth-shaker, Enosigaios, a title that reveals his true ancient nature as a chthonic or earthly god. The Greeks, living in a seismically active land, knew that an earthquake was often followed by a tsunami. They saw the two as one and the same force, a power that rose from the deep earth and the deep sea, and they attributed it to Poseidon. His primary symbol was the trident, a 3-pronged fishing spear that, in his hands, became a weapon capable of splitting mountains, summoning tsunamis, and stirring the sea into madness. His sacred animals were the horse, which some myths say he created from the sea foam, and the dolphin. Poseidon was defined by his realm, restless, moody, and prone to sudden, violent rage. He dwelled not on Olympus, but in a golden palace beneath the waves at Aigai. He married the Oceanide Amphitrite, who became his queen, but, like his brother Zeus, he was famously unfaithful. His most defining myth was not a love affair, but a rivalry. He vied with Zeus's daughter, Athena, for control of Greece's most prominent city. To win the people's favor, the two gods offered a gift. Poseidon strode to the center of the Acropolis, struck the rock with his trident, and from it burst forth a spring of water. The people marveled, but when they tasted it, they found it was salt water, as briny and untamable as the god himself. It represented naval power and the sea, but it was not life-giving. Athena then came forward. She quietly planted a seed in the ground, which instantly grew into the world's first olive tree. It was a gift of peace, prosperity, and sustenance. Its fruit gave food, its pits gave oil for light and hygiene, and its wood gave timber. The people, led by their king Cecrops, chose Athena's gift. The city was named Athens in her honor. Poseidon, in a characteristic fit of rage, flooded the entire surrounding plain. He remained a bitter rival of the city forever after. This story perfectly captures his nature, a god of immense, raw, and impressive power, but one that lacked the wisdom and utility of the new Olympian order. He was the force of nature, untamed. Athena was the force of civilization, applied. Hades, the unseen one. The third and eldest brother was Hades, a name that means the unseen. His domain was the underworld, the land of the dead, and his name became synonymous with the place itself. Hades is the most misunderstood of the Olympian-era gods. He is not a god of evil, nor is he a punisher of sin. That was the job of the Furies. He is not the Greek equivalent of the devil. He was, as the historian Walter Burkert emphasizes, simply the god of the dead. He was death as a fact. He was the host of all mortals, the one who receives everyone in the end. Because of this, he was grim, silent, and unyielding. No prayer ever swayed him. No sacrifice ever moved him to pity. He was the one who does not bargain. His sacred animal was the three-headed dog, Cerberus, who guarded the gates of his realm, letting all souls in but none out. His symbol was the helm of darkness, or cap of invisibility, a helmet forged by the Cyclopes that allowed its wearer to become unseen, much like death itself. Hades rarely left his misty kingdom. He had no throne on Olympus and took no part in the squabbles of the gods above. He was concerned only with the subjects of his own realm, the silent, fluttering shades of the dead. He was also, by extension, the god of the earth's hidden wealth, the Plutos, as all precious metals and gems are mined from deep within his domain. His central myth is the one and only time he emerged from the darkness, driven by a desire for a queen. He fell in love with Persephone, the daughter of his sister Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. Knowing Demeter would never consent, Hades acted with the swift violence of his brothers. He burst from a chasm in the earth and abducted the young goddess, dragging her down into the underworld to be his bride. This story, told most beautifully in the Homeric hymn to Demeter, is the foundational myth for the changing of the seasons. Demeter, mad with grief, wandered the earth searching for her daughter, and in her sorrow, she forbade any tree from fruiting or any seed from sprouting. The earth grew barren, and humanity faced extinction. Finally, Zeus was forced to intervene. He commanded Hades to release Persephone. Hades agreed, but before she left, he slyly offered her a parting gift, a pomegranate. Starving, she ate 6, or in some versions, 3, of the blood-red seeds. This act bound her to him. Because she had tasted the food of the dead, she could never fully leave. A compromise was struck. Persephone would spend 2/3 of the year on Earth with her mother, Demeter, bringing forth the life of spring and summer. But for the remaining 1/3, the winter, she must return to the underworld to rule as Hades' queen. Thus, the story of Hades is not one of evil, but of inevitability. He represents the unmovable laws of the cosmos, that life must be balanced by death, that the joy of summer must be paid for by the silence of winter, and that in the end, all things return to the earth. The queens of the cosmos, the Olympian sisters. The new order was held in balance not only by the 3 great kings who ruled the realms, but by their 3 powerful sisters. They were the eldest children of Cronus, the first to be swallowed and the last to be freed, save for Zeus himself. Where their brothers represented the domains of power, they represented the foundations of civilization, marriage, agriculture, and home. Hera, the queen of heaven. If Zeus was the king of the gods, Hera was, without question, the queen. She was not merely a consort, she was his sister and his equal in divine lineage, and she never allowed him to forget it. Her name, in its earliest forms, may simply mean the lady or the mistress. Her symbols were the diadem, the high crown of a queen, the peacock, whose starry-eyed tail represented her watchfulness over all things, and the cow, an ancient symbol of motherhood and fertility. Hera's domain was marriage, gamos, the sacred bond between husband and wife, the protection of the family, and the legitimacy of children. This is the central driving force of her entire mythology. While Zeus was unfaithful, Hera was defined by her absolute, unyielding faithfulness and her equally unyielding jealousy. The myths, as recorded by poets like Homer and Ovid, are filled with the stories of her terrible vengeance, not against her powerful husband, whom she could not truly harm, but against his lovers and their illegitimate offspring. It was Hera who sent gadflies to torment Io, a nymph Zeus had turned into a cow to hide. It was Hera who maneuvered to have Semele, the mother of Dionysus, burned to a crisp by the sight of Zeus's true form. And it was Hera who dedicated her entire immortal life to the persecution of Heracles, Zeus's greatest mortal son. To modern ears, this sounds petty and cruel, but to the Greeks, Hera was not simply a jealous wife. She was, as the scholar Walter Burkert notes, the divine defender of a core social structure. She was the fury of the legitimate wife against the forces of chaos that threatened the family. Her anger was the personification of a sacred social law being broken. In Homer's Iliad, she is portrayed as a magnificent, cunning, and often rebellious queen. She is the only goddess who consistently outwits Zeus, using her intelligence and her divine beauty to manipulate him to her own ends. In one famous scene, she borrows the enchanted girdle of Aphrodite, seduces Zeus on Mount Ida, and lulls him to sleep in her arms, all so she can turn the tide of the Trojan War against his wishes while he is distracted. Her worship was ancient, far older than many of the other Olympians. Temples at Samos and Argos were dedicated to her centuries before the classical era, suggesting she was once a powerful, pre-Greek great goddess in her own right, who was later married to the invading sky god, Zeus, to form the classical pantheon. She was proud, majestic, and terrifying, the true and often unforgiving matriarch of heaven. Demeter, the great mother of the earth. Where Hera ruled the social order of the family, her sister Demeter ruled the natural order of the earth. Her name means Earth Mother, or, more specifically, Grain Mother, Demeter. She was the goddess of the harvest, of agriculture, of all the life-giving grain that sustained humanity. Her symbols were the sheaf of wheat, the cornucopia, corn of plenty, and the torch, which she carried in her desperate, night-long search. Demeter was a kind and benevolent goddess, the source of all nourishment, but her central myth, detailed in the profound Homeric hymn to Demeter, reveals a power as absolute and terrifying as that of any god. The myth begins with the abduction of her beloved daughter, Persephone, by the god Hades, as we have seen. For Demeter, this was the end of the world. Tearing her veil, she left Olympus and wandered the earth disguised as an old grieving woman named Doso. Her grief was so powerful that it leached the life from the very planet. In her sorrow, Demeter declared a strike. She commanded that no seed in the earth should sprout, nor any tree bear fruit. The planet died. The furrows of the fields lay barren, the leaves withered on the trees. The gods on Olympus, deprived of the smoke from mortal sacrifices, began to panic. This was a demonstration of absolute power. The Olympians might rule the sky, but Demeter held the single power, food, upon which all life, mortal and divine, depended. During her wanderings, she came to the city of Eleusis, where she was taken in by the royal family. There, she nursed the king's infant son, Demophon, and, in a secret ritual, tried to make him immortal by anointing him with ambrosia and holding him in the hearth fire each night. When the queen, Metaneira, spied on her and screamed in terror, Demeter dropped the child, her divine form was revealed, and she declared her anger. To appease the goddess, the king built her a great temple at Eleusis. It was here that Zeus finally sent Hermes to command Hades to release Persephone. And it was here, after the compromise with the pomegranate seeds was struck, that Demeter was reunited with her daughter. Before returning to Olympus, Demeter, in her joy, caused the fields to burst into life again. But she also taught the kings of Eleusis her secret rites, establishing the Eleusinian mysteries. For 2,000 years, this became the most sacred and important religious cult in all of Greece. Initiates from all over the world would travel to Eleusis to participate in secret, multi-day rituals that reenacted Demeter's grief and joy. The exact nature of the mysteries was a secret punishable by death, but it was known that they promised a happy and blessed afterlife, a profound hope that Demeter, the goddess who had conquered death by retrieving her daughter, was uniquely qualified to give. The first and the last. The third sister, and the firstborn child of Cronus, was Hestia. Her name simply means the hearth, the fireplace at the center of the home. Hestia is the most elusive and perhaps the most sacred of all the Olympians. She has almost no myths. She never takes part in the gods' quarrels, wars, or love affairs. She never leaves Olympus. This absence of story is her story. She is the opposite of the other gods. She is not a personality, but a presence. She is the goddess of the center. Her symbols are the hearth itself and the simple veil of a modest and devoted maiden. Hestia was the first child Cronus swallowed, and the last child he regurgitated after the stone. For this reason, she was poetically known as Hestia, the first and the last. She was honored with a special vow of eternal virginity. The Homeric hymn to Aphrodite tells us that both Poseidon and Apollo sought her hand in marriage, but she refused them both, touching the head of Zeus and swearing an oath that she would remain a maiden forever. For this dedication, Zeus granted her a unique place of honor. She was to receive the first portion of every sacrifice, in every temple, and in every private home. Before any meal, the first offering was poured out to Hestia. She represented the sacred fire of the home, the nucleus of the family. But her role extended beyond the private house. The central public building of any Greek city-state, polis, was the Prytainion, which contained the city's public hearth. This fire, which was never allowed to go out, was sacred to Hestia. It was the symbol of the city as a single, unified family. When citizens left to found a new colony, they would carry an ember from Hestia's altar with them, establishing a direct, unbroken link to their mother city. While the other gods roamed the world, fathering heroes and fighting battles, Hestia remained at the center, unmoving, silent, and essential. She was the divine personification of stability, continuity, family, and home. In some later traditions, it was said that she willingly gave up her own throne on Olympus for the newcomer, Dionysus, preferring the sacred quiet of the hearth to the politics of the gods. She was the anchor of the new Olympian order. The second generation, the mind, the sun, and the wild. With the reign of the first generation established, the story of Olympus truly begins with the children of Zeus. These were not simply gods of abstract domains, they were gods of specific, refined concepts, strategy, art, prophecy, and the untamed wilderness. They were the brilliant, beautiful, and dangerous new faces of divine power. Athena, the mind of the gods. Athena, also called Pallas Athena, was perhaps Zeus's most unique child. As we have seen, her birth was a subversion of prophecy. She was not born from a womb, but sprang fully formed and in full armor from the head of Zeus himself, after he had swallowed her mother, the wise Titaness Metis. This origin story is the key to her entire being. She is the daughter of the Father, embodying the wisdom, cunning, and strategic intellect that Zeus had absorbed. She is her father's perfect agent, the only child he trusted to wield his aegis, the fearsome goatskin shield fringed with snakes and bearing the head of Medusa, and even his thunderbolts. Her domain was not just wisdom, but applied wisdom. She was the goddess of strategy, both in warfare and in statecraft. Where the god Ares represented the bloody, chaotic rage of battle, Athena represented the clear-eyed, intelligent, and victorious generalship. She was the divine patron of the civilized city-state, particularly her namesake, Athens. She was also the goddess of craft, Techne. She taught humanity the arts of weaving, pottery, and shipbuilding. Her symbols are all emblems of this sharp intellect: the owl, seeing clearly in the dark; the olive tree, the gift of sustainable civilization; and the spear, for the strategic application of force. Like Hestia, Athena swore a sacred oath of eternal virginity. She was Parthenos, the maiden, a title enshrined in her most famous temple, the Parthenon in Athens. This was not about modesty, it was about autonomy. By refusing marriage, she remained independent of any male god, bound only to her father, Zeus. She was the cool, logical, and brilliant mind of Olympus, the ultimate goddess of civilization and the intellect that sustains it. Apollo, the god of luminous order. Where Athena represented the mind's intellect, Apollo represented its creativity, its harmony, and its terrible, purifying light. He and his twin sister, Artemis, were the children of Zeus and the Titaness Leto. Their birth story, told in the Homeric hymn to Apollo, is one of persecution and exile. A jealous Hera, furious at Zeus's infidelity, forbade any land under the sun to give Leto shelter to give birth. Pursued, and in agony, Leto finally found the barren, floating rock of Delos, which was not technically land, and there, clinging to a sacred palm tree, she bore her 2 children. Delos was anchored in place and became one of the most sacred sites in all of Greece. Apollo became the most Greek of all the gods, the embodiment of the Hellenic ideal of Sophrosyne, moderation, balance, and rational order. He was the god of music and poetry, his symbol the lyre, which his infant half-brother Hermes had invented and given to him. He was the leader of the 9 muses, the divine artist. He was also the god of prophecy. Soon after his birth, he traveled to the mountains and slew the great serpent, Python, a chthonic child of Gaia who guarded the ancient earth oracle at Pytho. Apollo claimed the site for himself, establishing the Oracle of Delphi, which would become the absolute center of the Greek religious world. All his prophecies were delivered through a priestess, the Pythia, who was said to breathe in the vapors from the chasm where the serpent had rotted. The famous command at his temple, "Know thyself," was the core of his philosophy. Finally, he was a god of purification and plague. His arrows, shot from a silver bow, could bring sudden, pestilential death to cities that had offended the gods, as seen in the opening of Homer's Iliad. But he was also Alexikakos, the averter of evil, the god who could cleanse a man of ritual pollution and disease. While associated with the sun, a role he later fully absorbed from the Titan Helios, he was, at his core, a god of radiant, intellectual, and sometimes ruthless order. Yet for all his beauty and harmony, his personal myths are almost universally tragic. He was a disastrous lover. The nymph Daphne fled from him and was turned into a laurel tree to escape. He gave Cassandra the gift of true prophecy, but when she spurned him, he cursed her so that no one would ever believe her. And he accidentally killed his young male lover Hyacinthus with a discus. Apollo, the god of perfection, seemed doomed to be surrounded by tragic imperfection. Artemis, the Lady of the Wild. Apollo's twin sister, Artemis, was his perfect opposite and his perfect mirror. If he was the god of civilized order, she was the goddess of the absolute, untamed wilderness. Artemis was the Potnia Theron, the mistress of animals. She was the goddess of the hunt, of the wild forests, of the mountains, and of all uncultivated places. Like Apollo, her primary symbol was the bow and arrow, but where his arrows brought plague or purification, hers brought the swift, clean kill of the hunt. She was also, paradoxically, the primary protector of the young, both of wild animals and of human children, especially young girls before they were married. She was the goddess of childbirth, a role she earned by helping her mother, Leto, deliver her twin brother Apollo immediately after her own birth. Like Athena and Hestia, Artemis was one of the three great virgin goddesses. Her chastity was her defining feature, a symbol of her fierce independence and her wild, untamable nature. She was not part of the city, not part of the family structure. She belonged to the moonlit forests surrounded by her band of devoted nymphs. Her other symbol was the crescent moon, which she wore on her brow, linking her to the night sky just as her brother was linked to the sun. But her purity was not gentle, it was lethally defended. Artemis was perhaps the most ruthless and unforgiving of all the Olympians when slighted. When the hunter Actaeon stumbled upon her and her nymphs bathing in a forest spring, he stared at her divine form. For this violation, Artemis did not speak. She simply splashed him with water, transforming him into a stag. His own hunting dogs, no longer recognizing their master, tore him to pieces. When Queen Niobe boasted that she was superior to the goddess Leto because she had 14 children while Leto only had 2, Apollo and Artemis took up their bows. Apollo shot down all 7 of Niobe's sons, and Artemis shot down all 7 of her daughters. Artemis is a goddess of contradictions. She is the protector of the young and their killer, the goddess of the hunt and the guardian of the animals she hunts, the bringer of a mercifully quick death to women in childbirth, and the goddess of life's wildest frontiers. She is the embodiment of the beautiful, immoral, and fiercely pure power of nature itself. Passion, conflict, and craft. If the children of Leto represented the tension between civilization and the wild, the next group of Olympians embodied the raw, volatile forces that shape human society from within. Overwhelming passion, brutal conflict, and the patient craft required to build and to destroy. Aphrodite, the golden goddess of desire. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, and uncontrollable desire, holds a unique and ancient place in the pantheon. Her origin is in fact pre-Olympian. As the poet Hesiod tells in his Theogony, Aphrodite was born not from Zeus, but from the primal violence that ended the first age. When Cronus castrated his father Uranus, he threw the severed flesh into the sea. From the white, divine foam, Aphros, that churned in the water, she arose, fully formed, and drifted to shore on a scallop shell, first at Cythera and then at Cyprus. This origin story is crucial. Aphrodite is not the product of civilized Olympian order. She is a force of nature, as old as the cosmos itself, born from the raw generative power of the first god. Homer, in the Iliad, offers a simpler, more Olympian version, calling her the daughter of Zeus and the ocean nymph Dione. But the older, more violent tale always clung to her, explaining the irresistible, chaotic, and often destructive nature of the passion she controlled. Her domain was not the calm domestic love of Hera, it was Eros, the all-consuming, maddening force of sexual desire and physical beauty. Her symbols were the dove, the rose, the myrtle tree, and her magical girdle, the Kestos Hemos, which, as Homer describes, contained all the powers of enchantment and could make anyone, mortal or divine, fall hopelessly in love. She was attended by the Charite, the Graces, and Eros, the winged god of love, later known as Cupid, who was sometimes her son. To the Olympians, she was a problem. Her power was a destabilizing force that could bring kings and gods to their knees. In a move of political containment, Zeus married her off to the most unlikely of husbands, Hephaestus, the lame, deformed, and industrious smith god. This, of course, was a disaster. Beauty was bound to the forge, but it would not be contained. Aphrodite immediately began a long, flagrant, and passionate affair with the god of war, Ares. Ares, the god of war. Ares was the god of war, but he was not the honored, strategic war of Athena. He was the god of war's brutal reality, the bloodlust, the chaos, the rage, and the sheer physical violence of the battlefield. He was the son of Zeus and Hera, one of the few legitimate children of the royal couple, but he was almost universally despised. Even his own father, Zeus, tells him as much in the Iliad, saying, "To me, you are the most hateful of all the gods who hold Olympus, for strife is ever dear to you, and wars and battles." His symbols were the spear, the helmet, and the vulture, the bird that feasted on the carnage he left behind. His sacred animal was the boar, a creature known for its sudden, aggressive, and destructive charges. Unlike Athena, who was always victorious, Ares was often portrayed as a blustering, incompetent, and even cowardly brute. In the Trojan War, he sided with the Trojans and was repeatedly humiliated. He was wounded by the mortal hero Diomedes, who was guided by Athena, and fled back to Olympus screaming in pain like 10,000 men. While the Greeks built temples to Athena as the glorious defender of the city, they built few temples to Ares. He was acknowledged as a necessary force, but he was not loved. He was the embodiment of that which every Greek feared, but could not escape, the madness of the battlefield. His only true victory on Olympus was his affair with Aphrodite. He was the raw, physical embodiment of the lust she represented. Their union was not one of love, but of pure, animalistic passion. Hephaestus, the divine craftsman. The third member of this chaotic triangle was Hephaestus, the god of the forge, of fire, of metalworking, and of all craftsmanship. He was the divine artisan, the smith who built the palaces on Olympus and forged the gods' greatest weapons, including Zeus's thunderbolts. He was the son of Hera, and his origin is one of bitterness. In some myths, he is the son of Zeus and Hera, but in the version told by Hesiod, Hera, enraged that Zeus had produced Athena from his own head, decided to do the same. She bore Hephaestus apart from Zeus, a child of her own spite. But the child was born lame and deformed, so ugly that Hera, ashamed, seized him by the foot and threw him from the high peak of Olympus. He fell for a day and a night, landing in the sea, where the sea goddesses Tethys and Eurynome rescued him and raised him in a hidden grotto. There, he perfected his craft, becoming the greatest smith in the universe. Hephaestus is the only Olympian who is physically imperfect. He is the only god who works. He is the ultimate outsider, the brilliant, shunned artist, the laborer among aristocrats. His symbols were the hammer, the anvil, and the tongs. His sacred animal was the donkey, a humble, stubborn, and hard-working beast. Hephaestus eventually returned to Olympus, where he was given Aphrodite as a wife, a gift from Zeus that was really an insult, the most beautiful goddess bound to the ugliest god. Hephaestus knew of her affair with Ares, and his revenge, as told in Homer's Odyssey, is a masterpiece of his cunning craft. He did not challenge Ares to a fight, he used his intellect. Hephaestus forged a net, as fine as a spider's web, but as strong as adamant, and hung it over his marriage bed, rigging it with invisible triggers. The next time Ares and Aphrodite lay together, the net fell, trapping them in their embrace, completely naked and utterly helpless. Hephaestus then threw open the doors of his bedchamber and summoned all the other gods and goddesses to come and see. As the Odyssey recounts, the gods roared with laughter. Apollo nudged Hermes, asking if he'd be willing to trade places with Ares, even bound in a net. Hermes famously replied that he would suffer thrice those bonds to lie beside golden Aphrodite. Hephaestus had been humiliated by his wife, but he, in turn, humiliated the two most arrogant gods on Olympus, proving that craft and intelligence could triumph over both passion and brute force. This story perfectly encapsulates the relationship between the three, love, war, and craft, forever bound together in a messy, creative, and destructive divine drama. The boundary crossers, the trickster, and the ecstatic. Finally, we come to the last two Olympians, the youngest of the second generation. They are the most complex, the most human, and the most disruptive. They are not gods of fixed domains like the sky or the sea, but gods of transitions and exceptions. They are the gods who cross every border, between Olympus and between Earth and the underworld, between civilization and chaos, and between the mind and madness. Hermes, the messenger of the gods. Hermes was the son of Zeus and Maia, a shy nymph and the daughter of the Titan Atlas. He was born in secret, in a deep cave on Mount Selene, far from the jealous eyes of Hera. His entire personality is revealed in the Homeric hymn to Hermes, which details the exploits of his very first day of life. Born at dawn, he was a precocious and alarmingly clever infant. By midday, he was bored. He slipped out of his cradle, found a tortoise ambling by his cave, and in a flash of amoral genius, killed it, hollowed out its shell, stretched 7 strings of sheep gut across it, and invented the lyre. By evening, he was hungry for meat. He snuck away to the fields of Pieria, where his brother Apollo grazed his immortal sacred cattle. Hermes stole 50 of the best cows, and to cover his tracks, he made them walk backwards to his cave, while he himself fashioned sandals to obscure his own tiny footprints. He then skillfully butchered 2 of the cows, made the first fire by friction, sacrificed a portion to the gods, ironically including himself, and slipped back into his cradle, the picture of innocence, as if he were a witless baby, all before morning. When Apollo, the god of prophecy, finally tracked him down, Hermes simply blinked at him and, as the hymn says, let out a little baby fart. This is Hermes. He is the ultimate trickster. He is the god of cunning, metis, of cleverness, of boundaries, and of crossing them. When an enraged Apollo dragged him before Zeus for judgment, Hermes, completely unfazed, picked up his newly invented lyre and began to play. Apollo, the god of music, was so utterly enchanted by the sound that his anger melted away. He struck a deal. Hermes could keep the stolen cattle, and in exchange, Apollo would receive the lyre, which became one of his most sacred symbols. From that day, Hermes was the designated messenger of the gods, Charax. He was the divine diplomat, the problem solver, the one who could move between worlds and negotiate. His symbols are all about speed and transition: the talaria, winged sandals, the pedasos, winged traveler's cap, and the caduceus, the herald staff, entwined with 2 snakes, a symbol of commerce and negotiation. Because he crosses all boundaries, he became the patron of travelers, protecting them on unknown roads; merchants, who move goods between cities; thieves and liars, who operate in the shadows and cross the lines of law; eloquence, the art of using words to move between ideas; and most importantly, he was the psychopompos, the guide of souls. When a mortal died, it was Hermes, the only god besides Hades who could freely enter and leave the underworld, who gently guided their soul from the land of the living to the shores of the river Styx. He was the god of the threshold, the god of the in-between, the charming, witty, and amoral facilitator of all movement in the cosmos. Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy. The 12th and final Olympian was Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, madness, and the theater. He was the ultimate outsider, the last god to arrive on Olympus, in some traditions, taking the throne Hestia had willingly vacated, and his story is one of tragedy, persecution, and divine liberation. Dionysus was the only Olympian to have a mortal mother. He was the son of Zeus and Semele, the princess of Thebes. A jealous Hera, disguised as an old woman, befriended the pregnant Semele and planted a seed of doubt in her mind. How did she know her lover was truly Zeus? She convinced Semele to ask her lover for one boon, to see him in his true divine form. Bound by an oath, Zeus had to comply. He appeared before Semele as he truly was, a being of pure light and thunder, and the mortal princess was instantly incinerated. But Zeus, acting quickly, snatched the unborn fetus from the ashes and, in a bizarre act of male birth, sewed the infant into his own thigh. Months later, Dionysus was born from Zeus, making him the twice-born god. This dual origin, born of a mortal mother, gestated in a divine father, defined his nature. He was the god who was both human and divine, the god of the in-between, just like Hermes. Dionysus wandered the world, spreading his cult, the worship of the grapevine. His was not the polite, civilized consumption of wine, it was the use of wine to achieve ecstasy, standing outside oneself. He was the god who, through wine, music, and dance, liberated his followers from their everyday identities, from social conventions, and from the constraints of rational thought. His followers were the Maenads, the raving ones, ecstatic women who would leave their homes and dance in a frenzy on the mountains, and the Satyrs, goat-like men of wild, unchecked appetites. This new, chaotic, and foreign religion was seen as a threat to the rational order of the Greek city-state. The most famous story of this conflict is the Bacchae, the play by Euripides. Dionysus returns to his birthplace, Thebes, but his own cousin, King Pentheus, denies his divinity and tries to arrest him. Pentheus represents the cold, rigid, masculine order, Dionysus the fluid, feminine, irrational chaos. The conflict ends in horror. Dionysus, the gentle liberator, unleashes the divine madness on Pentheus's family. The king is lured to the mountains, where the Maenads, led by his own mother, Agave, mistake him for a mountain lion in their ecstatic frenzy and tear him limb from limb. Dionysus is the god of this terrifying paradox. His gift is divine joy, but the price of resisting that joy is total dissolution. He is the patron of the theater, where actors stand outside themselves to become someone else. His symbols are the grapevine, ivy, the thyrsus, a staff topped with a pine cone, and the leopard, a symbol of his beautiful, wild, and dangerous Eastern origins. Conclusion: the Olympian pantheon. And so, the reign of the Olympians was complete. The cosmos that began with the raw elemental power of the Titans was now ruled by a complex, passionate, and contradictory family of gods. They were not distant, perfect beings, they were a mirror. In their new order, every aspect of the human condition was given a divine face. In Apollo and Artemis, they saw the conflict between civilization and the wild. In Athena and Ares, the difference between strategy and rage. In Aphrodite and Hephaestus, the tension between beauty and the craft that tries to capture it. And in Dionysus and Hermes, they saw the necessary chaos, the trickery, and the ecstatic release that make life unpredictable and ultimately worth living. The Titans were the foundation, but the Olympians were the story. And it is their story of love, of war, of jealousy, of art, and of flawed, magnificent power that built the imagination of the Western world. Part 3. The Hidden Depths of Olympus. The Hidden Depths, lesser-known tales of the Olympian age. While the great myths of Zeus's thunderbolts and Athena's wisdom dominate our understanding of Greek mythology, there exists beneath these famous narratives a rich undercurrent of lesser-known stories that reveal the true complexity of the Olympian pantheon. These are the tales rarely told in introductory texts, the myths that expose the paradoxes, the failures, and the strange compromises that characterized divine rule. The Forgotten Children, Minor Olympians and Their Struggles. Not every child of Zeus ascended to the highest glory. The Olympian family tree is littered with divine offspring who, despite their parentage, remained forever in the shadows of their more celebrated siblings. Theia, the goddess who could not refuse. Theia was the goddess of childbirth, the daughter of Zeus and Hera. Her role was simple yet absolutely critical. She presided over the moment of labor, and without her presence, no child, mortal or divine, could be born. She held the keys to life itself. But Theia was also a pawn. Her mother, Hera, used her relentlessly as a weapon of revenge against Zeus's lovers. When Leto was in labor with Apollo and Artemis, Hera commanded Eileithyia to withhold her aid. For 9 days and 9 nights, Leto writhed in agony on the barren island of Delos, unable to give birth. The other goddesses, moved by her suffering, finally bribed Eileithyia with a magnificent necklace of gold and amber, 9 cubits long. Only then did she defy her mother and allow the divine twins to be born. This pattern repeated throughout mythology. Eileithyia was the goddess who should have been universally revered, the bringer of new life, but she became instead a tragic figure, forever caught between her duty to all mothers and her obligation to her jealous, vengeful mother. Hebe, the cupbearer replaced. Hebe, whose name simply means youth, was another daughter of Zeus and Hera. She was the goddess of young adulthood, that perfect bloom of life between childhood and maturity. Her role on Olympus was to serve as the divine cupbearer, pouring nectar and ambrosia for the gods at their eternal feasts. It was an honorable position, but it was also servile, and Hebe, despite being the daughter of the king and queen, was essentially a waitress at the cosmic banquet. Her role came to an abrupt and humiliating end. According to later myths, during one particularly raucous feast, Hebe tripped and fell in an undignified position before the assembled gods. The laughter was immediate and merciless. Zeus, embarrassed by his daughter's clumsiness, stripped her of her position and replaced her with a mortal, the Trojan prince Ganymede, whom Zeus had abducted specifically because of his extraordinary beauty. Hebe was eventually married off to the newly immortalized hero Heracles as a kind of consolation prize, becoming his wife after his apotheosis. But her story reveals an uncomfortable truth. Even on Olympus, even among the divine family, there was hierarchy, there was humiliation, and there was replacement. Ares' children, the embodiments of war's horror. While Ares himself represented the general chaos of battle, his children with Aphrodite, born from that scandalous union of war and love, personified specific aspects of warfare's terror. Phobos and Deimos, fear and dread, were twin gods who accompanied their father onto the battlefield. They were not fighters, they were psychological weapons. Homer describes them yoking Ares' chariot, driving terror before the god of war like a physical force. They appeared on shields as apotopropaic symbols, frightening faces meant to scare enemies away. But the most interesting of Ares' children was Harmonia, the goddess of harmony. Her very existence was paradoxical. How could war and love produce harmony? The answer lies in the Greek understanding of harmony, not as the absence of conflict, but as the productive tension between opposing forces. Harmonia was the balance, the necessary peace that follows war, the union of opposites. She married Cadmus, the founder of Thebes, in a wedding attended by all the Olympians, one of the few mortal divine marriages so honored. But even this blessed union carried a curse. Aphrodite gifted Harmonia a beautiful necklace, but it was cursed, bringing disaster to every woman who wore it for generations. Harmonia's life, like her nature, embodied the Greek tragic principle that even harmony contains the seeds of its own destruction. The price of divine justice, punishment myths beyond Prometheus. The tale of Prometheus chained to his rock is well known, but the Olympians enacted countless other punishments, each revealing different aspects of their justice and their cruelty. Tantalus, the eternal hunger. Tantalus was a king, a son of Zeus, who was honored above all mortals by being invited to dine with the gods on Olympus. But Tantalus committed an unthinkable crime. To test whether the gods were truly omniscient, he murdered his own son, Pelops, cooked his flesh, and served it to the gods as a meal. The gods, of course, immediately recognized what had been done. Only Demeter, still distracted by grief over Persephone, accidentally ate a piece of Pelops' shoulder. The gods restored the boy to life, replacing his missing shoulder with one of ivory, and turned their full wrath upon Tantalus. His punishment in the underworld was ingenious in its cruelty. He stood in a pool of water beneath a fruit tree. Whenever he bent to drink, the water receded. Whenever he reached for fruit, the branches pulled away. He suffered eternal hunger and thirst, surrounded by abundance he could never consume. This is the origin of our word tantalize, to torment with the sight of something desirable but unattainable. But there was a deeper meaning to this punishment. Tantalus had violated Xenia, the sacred law of hospitality. He had been a guest at the gods' table and had repaid their honor with the ultimate desecration. His punishment was thus a perfect inversion, the eternal guest who can never consume, the honored diner who starves at the feast. Divine justice in Greek thought was always poetically appropriate. Sisyphus, the stone that never stays. Sisyphus, the king of Corinth, was renowned as the craftiest of all mortals. He cheated death not once, but twice. When Thanatos, the personification of death, came for him, Sisyphus tricked him into demonstrating how the chains of death worked, then locked death himself in the chains. For a time, no one on Earth could die, a situation that threatened the cosmic order itself. When Ares finally freed death and Sisyphus was dragged to the underworld, he executed his second trick. Before dying, he had instructed his wife not to perform the proper burial rites. In Hades, he complained to Persephone about this disrespect and begged to be allowed to return to the surface to punish his wife. She granted his request, but once back among the living, Sisyphus simply refused to return. Finally, Hermes himself had to drag Sisyphus back to the underworld, where an eternal punishment awaited. He must roll a massive boulder up a steep hill. Each time he neared the summit, the stone would slip from his grasp and roll back to the bottom, and he would have to begin again. The French philosopher Albert Camus, in his essay The Myth of Sisyphus, saw in this tale the perfect metaphor for human existence: absurd, repetitive, seemingly meaningless. But the ancient Greeks saw something more specific: the punishment of cleverness without wisdom. Sisyphus could outsmart death, but he could not outsmart the fundamental nature of reality. His eternal labor was the labor of the trickster who has finally met a system he cannot game. Ixion, the Wheel of Fire. Ixion was another guest who violated divine hospitality. Zeus, in an act of extraordinary mercy, had purified Ixion of the murder of his father-in-law and invited him to Olympus. But Ixion, instead of showing gratitude, attempted to seduce Hera herself. Zeus, testing him, created a cloud copy of Hera named Nephele. Ixion, fooled, made love to the cloud, proving his guilt. From this bizarre union was born the first centaur, representing the bestial nature of Ixion's lust. Zeus's punishment was direct and eternal. Ixion was bound to a fiery wheel that spun forever through the sky, a human version of Helios' sun, forever burning, forever spinning, never stopping. The Greeks who saw shooting stars, or the whirling constellations, sometimes thought of Ixion, the treacherous guest, wheeling through eternity, his screams lost in the void. Divine romances, love beyond the famous affairs. Zeus's countless infidelities are legendary, but the love lives of the other Olympians reveal equally complex and often more touching stories. Eos and the Curse of Immortality. Eos, the rosy-fingered dawn, was cursed by Aphrodite to fall in love with mortal after mortal, a punishment for sleeping with Ares. Her greatest love was Tithonus, a Trojan prince of such extraordinary beauty that she could not be without him. Eos begged Zeus to grant Tithonus immortality, and the king of the gods agreed. But Eos, in her desperation, forgot to ask for eternal youth as well. At first, the couple was happy. Tithonus lived in her palace at the edge of the world where the dawn is born each day. They had 2 sons together. But as decades passed, Tithonus began to age. His hair turned white, his skin wrinkled, his back bent, yet he could not die. He grew smaller and withered, his voice becoming a thin chirp. Still, Eos loved him and could not bear to release him from life. Finally, when Tithonus had shriveled to the size of a grasshopper, unable to move or speak, only to chirp endlessly, Eos took pity. She transformed him into a cicada, the insect whose song heralds the dawn. Every morning, the cicadas sing, and it is Tithonus calling out from his eternal prison, greeting his beloved Eos as she paints the sky. This myth served as a warning. Immortality without youth is not a gift, but a curse. The god's greatest blessing, eternal life, becomes, without wisdom in the asking, the cruelest fate. Hades and Persephone, the unexpected tenderness. While the abduction of Persephone is well known, what is less often discussed is what happened after the compromise was reached. Did Persephone remain a prisoner, or did she become a true queen of the underworld? The evidence suggests transformation. In the Odyssey, when Odysseus travels to the underworld, it is not the silent, sulking girl who greets him, but Persephone, the dread Persephone, who commands the spirits and judges the dead. She is not Hades' captive, she is his equal, his co-ruler, feared and respected in her own right. In some versions of the myth, particularly those associated with the Eleusinian mysteries, Persephone eventually comes to love Hades, or at least to understand him. He is not cruel to her, he is simply Hades, unchanging, unyielding, but not unkind. He gives her dominion over the dead, making her one of the most powerful goddesses in the entire pantheon. There is even a myth where Persephone shows her own capacity for jealousy. When Hades briefly became enamored with the nymph Minth, Persephone did not weep or flee. She trampled the nymph underfoot and transformed her into the mint plant. This is not the action of a victim, this is the action of a queen defending her domain. The marriage of Hades and Persephone, viewed in this light, becomes one of the most successful divine marriages in all of Greek mythology. Unlike Zeus and Hera's constant warfare, or the bizarre triangle of Hephaestus, Aphrodite, and Ares, Hades and Persephone found something approaching true partnership. Born from trauma, yes, but evolving into respect, power sharing, and perhaps even a form of love. The Metamorphoses, transformation as divine punishment and mercy. The Olympians possessed a particular power that they exercised with disturbing frequency, the power of metamorphosis. Transformation into animal, plant, or star was both punishment and, paradoxically, a form of immortality. Callisto, the she-bear in the stars. Callisto was a nymph, a devoted follower of Artemis who had sworn an oath of chastity. But Zeus, ever unable to control his desires, came to her. Some versions say he seduced her by disguising himself as Artemis herself. Others say it was simply rape. When Callisto's pregnancy became visible during a group bathing, Artemis, furious at this violation of her oath, transformed her into a bear and set her own hunting dogs upon her. Callisto fled into the wilderness, no longer a maiden, no longer even human. Years later, her son Arcas, now a grown hunter, encountered a bear in the forest. He did not know it was his mother. Callisto, still possessing her human mind within the bear's body, recognized her son and tried to approach him. Arcas, seeing only a bear charging toward him, raised his spear. Zeus, watching from Olympus, finally intervened. He could not undo the transformation, but he could immortalize them both. He seized both mother and son and flung them into the heavens, where they became the constellations Ursa Major, the Great Bear, and Ursa Minor, circling the celestial pole forever. Hera, still jealous, had one final revenge. She convinced her old foster parents, Oceanus and Tethys, never to allow the bears to bathe in their waters. This is why, in Greek astronomy, these constellations never set below the horizon. They are the only constellations forever denied the cleansing bath of the ocean, circling endlessly, never resting. Arachne, the arrogance of mortal skill. Arachne was a weaver of such extraordinary skill that people began to say she was better than Athena herself, the goddess who had invented weaving. Arachne, foolishly, agreed with them. Athena, disguised as an old woman, warned Arachne to show humility. The mortal girl refused and challenged the goddess to a contest. Athena, insulted, accepted. Both wove magnificent tapestries. Athena's depicted the glory of the gods and the punishments of mortals who defied them, a clear warning. Arachne's tapestry, in an act of breathtaking audacity, depicted the gods' crimes and hypocrisies, Zeus's rapes, Poseidon's violence, Apollo's failed loves. It was a catalogue of divine shame, and it was flawlessly executed. Even Athena had to admit Arachne's work was perfect, but perfection without reverence was intolerable. Athena tore the tapestry to pieces and struck Arachne. In despair and shame, Arachne tried to hang herself. But Athena would not allow her the escape of death. She transformed the rope into a web and Arachne herself into a spider, condemning her to weave forever, producing beauty from her own body, trapped in endless, meaningless labor. The spider's web, delicate and perfect, became a monument to the danger of challenging the gods, no matter how skilled you might be. Conclusion: the weight of divine rule. These lesser-known tales reveal a profound truth about the Olympian order. It was not a perfect system, and the gods knew it. They were beings of immense power, but also of immense limitation. They could transform, punish, and reward, but they could not fundamentally change the nature of existence. Death still came, suffering still existed, and even the gods themselves were subject to fate. The minor Olympians struggled for recognition. The punished mortals endured their eternal torments. The lovers suffered from the curse of divine attention. And through all, the great cosmic experiment of Olympian rule continued, a system more sophisticated than the Titans' raw elemental power, but no less capable of cruelty, no less prone to failure. These are the hidden depths of Olympus, not the shining heights, but the shadows beneath, where the price of divine order is paid in full.